the Midland Planning Commission.
Susan Waters, Council.
Chet Norikis, Council.
Richard Johnson, Planning Director.
Kirsten Green, working for you. I'm the lead consultant for the consulting team, Koganon Green.
Lawrence Kamar, also working with you and with Kirsten from Kamar & Associates, Architecture Town Planning.
Deborah Nicholson, Senior Planner.
Jared Cunningham, Planning Commission.
Dick Anderson, City Council.
Steve Griffiths, Planning Commission.
Bruce Robinson, Planning Commission. And who do we have?
Michael Bradley, Public Works Director.
David Reese, Reese & Associates, engineering firm on the team.
And Rich Catlin, Reese Associates.
All right. Without further ado, then, I'll turn it over to Deborah Nicholson. Please.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. I know you're really excited about another meeting, but we have made a lot of progress since we last talked to you about this project in December. And since then, the consultants have been busily working on trying to figure out how to take that illustrative plan we created and turn it into a land use and transportation plan, and then analyze the impacts of that kind of development on the city. And also then trying to figure out how we are going to implement this plan. We were supposed to have a project advisory committee meeting at the beginning of the month, but we decided to delay for a couple weeks so that staff and consultants could have a chance to work through some of the potential issues. And I think we did a good job of that. We had a project advisory committee meeting this noon for 2 hours, and we had 10 members of the project advisory committee here. It was a nice cross-section of people from the community, lots of expertise and different perspectives. We got a lot of good comments. And we did run over a little bit. We're trying not to do that tonight. So we will let Kirsten lead us through and try to keep on track. But we do really appreciate comments and want to make sure that everyone is comfortable with where we're at right now, so that when they wrap up, now we have really crossed we're over the hump, and we are now getting ready to start preparing the draft plan. So we want to make sure we're all on board and feel comfortable with this project before we do. Yes.
Let the record show that Kip Ward and Ron Chandler have joined us.
That's right. Okay. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Kirsten.
Thanks. So we are going to receive your comments on 3 memos that we've prepared since, as Deborah said, December. And these are built off the land use and transportation diagram that we'll just review in a moment. So just to make sure, refresh our memory, since we know it's April now, and December was just 4 months ago. So the 3 memos, the transportation analysis, I'll touch on that in a bit. Cost and funding sources. DJ Heffernan with our consulting team is on the phone and available to answer questions. And the implementation strategies. And I want to really thank Deborah, Richard, the Public Works and Engineering departments, as well as Urban Renewal District, all city members of the project management team that has helped guide our work and ground the work, so that we're delivering to you a plan this summer that is adoptable and implementable. So we don't like plans that sit on the shelf. This is a very exciting area in the city, one of many areas in your city, but it's been a pleasure to work on. I'd like to deliver something that actually can come to fruition over the long term. This is, we do work in long-range planning, and long-range planning in Oregon is usually 20 years, as you're probably familiar. We have so many experienced planning commissioners and councils around the table tonight, but normally there's a 20-year plan horizon. Here, this is really a build-out probably for about more like 50 years. So there's multiple reasons to do this study. Deborah briefed you on that as she applied for the grant from the state, which is funding this work. But some of it is just building out and creating additional housing supply and workforce housing. We'll talk about that, but also some positively redundant transportation systems to take some of the pressure off 101 for daily use for residents on the east side of the highway, as well as in case of emergency.
And employment.
And
This is our
employment.
big employment area.
Yes, that's right. We have, yes. Deb, would you like to mention the 3 studies you're initiating, the BLI, HNA, EOA?
Oh,
Yeah.
right. I think most of you are aware, but we did get a grant to do update to our economic opportunities analysis, our buildable lands inventory, and our housing needs analysis. We just released an RFP, request for proposals, Friday, and we are asking consultants to respond by the end of the month. So we are going to be moving right into that one. And it does tie nicely into this because we have had so much emphasis from our PAC members as well as from you about the need for an affordable workforce housing neighborhood, as well as opportunities for business locations. So I think this will be great, and it will be informed by this study and vice versa.
Great. So just to touch, if I may, on the vision that we've been working with since June, we kicked off this study with you almost a year ago, but we started out with some vision and goals. So just not to hide the ball there, I'll put it all up. Pictures on the right here are from the week-long Community Design Week in October. But in 2045, again, long range plan, NELSCOP is developing both east and west of the highway in a district that is economically vibrant and attractive and creates value for property owners, welcoming both tourists as well as year-round residents. So it's trying to accomplish a lot. Residents enjoy opportunities for lifelong learning at the community college and Licking County schools, and students are able to, residents as well as visitors are able to travel safely to the campuses by walking, biking, taking transit, or driving. So that's the overall vision statement. That still look adequate and solid foundation from which to build. The goals that we went over with you then, we haven't changed those, so now we're just working on implementing them, but are around lifelong learning in the district, livability and housing, particularly the extreme shortage of workforce housing that we hear about in Lincoln City as a whole, but also in NELSCOP. The economy, Deborah mentioned that this is, if your employment zone is in this district, so we'll touch on that a little bit more in a moment, but the citywide economic opportunities analysis you're kicking up will really help inform what you do with that district. Heritage and inclusion, we've actually broken that out into heritage and inclusion just as a reference to both our past as well as the select tribes and our future, our diversifying community, including the Latino and Spanish-speaking residents in Lincoln City. And then, of course, the ecology and natural resources, really, without which we wouldn't be here, and are very powerful in this area with the transect running from the ocean all the way up into the hills. So you have, several ecological zones here within this district in a very short amount of time. So mindful of that, including the natural resources of the drainage of Baldy Creek, drainages and Baldy Creek in the study area. So there's some policies to implement these goals in Tech Memo 6, and we'll get that to the last of our memos here today. So with that just basic overview, and just feel free to interrupt or raise your hand if you think we've missed something. I would just turn over to Lauren to touch on the illustrative diagram and the land use and transportation diagram from which we've been working to then develop implementation strategies. So please, Lauren.
Thank you. This is the illustrative plan that you have seen before. It was developed with the community during the design week last October, and then has been refined. And really, what we've been doing ever since then has been refining, making some adjustments here and there, receiving a lot of comments back, and then you'll see the subsequent diagrams that have been done after that. But just to go back to what was created at that time during the design week. Let's begin with the NELSCOP strip. It really is the core, the beginning, the nucleus and in a lot of ways, the connection between the west side of the highway and the east side of the highway. With the new signalized intersection and the realignment of 32nd, that's become really a major main and main, as they say, as many towns throughout the country have a main and main that became the center of a town. That's, in a sense, the center of this district that has always been there, but is growing even further now. Let me point out then this one new street that is rising up through, that actually came out of the transportation system plan that has been adopted some years ago, or just recent
2012,
years.
yeah.
2012. And we have incorporated that in very carefully, laid it out onto the topography, and sort of verified and justified that as a new parallel to the highway, and one that connects up and goes further south down to the schools that are just off of the map here, and then connecting up into a local street network as well. Centering a new neighborhood, in particular in this core area, you'll see a circle and another circle here. Those circles are indicating 5-minute walking radii from the center of the circle to the edge, quarter of a mile. I'd like to just use that as a dimension, a way of looking at something this big, a whole neighborhood. So it takes about a 5-minute walk for a quarter of a mile, or a 10-minute walk from edge to edge of the circle through the diameter. Other major characteristics to look at here is the different coloration. You'll see that coming up in the next land use diagram that'll come after this, even with more clarity. But you're seeing a dark red hatching here. That's indicating the horizontal mixed use. There's also a red that is existing Nelscott zone in a similar color, but without that hatching that we have here. Similarly, up north, these are commercial zones. Going up the hill a little bit is the village community, and then further up is hillside residential. So we're not using those same old terms that you hear often in land use planning of various commercial and industrial zones and high-density residential, medium-density, and low-density residential. We're using slightly different terms to say that things are mixed. This is all about being a walkable, mixed-use neighborhood where people can live and work and shop.
Call from Peter Covers.
Sorry, just rejected. Thank you.
So, neighborhoods that are connected with a network of streets and smaller blocks, and pathways and greenways and parks, and a mix of uses that people, as I was just saying, can live in their home and walk to shops that are nearby, or maybe walk to work. And if not, hop on their bike and go a little further, or hop in their car and use the highway just as much as it always has, connecting in various places, but also connecting on these parallel routes. And we'll show you a couple of other potential street connections that go up into these northeastern corner, which is outside the current urban growth boundary. We have the industrial area out here.
Which is actually a reduction of the existing industrial area, so focusing a little bit there, recognizing the topography of the western part of the existing zone industrial areas doesn't necessarily lend itself to industry, so that we want things to look at your citywide economic opportunities analysis, what are the best places for industry citywide as well as in this area.
So what Kirsten's referring to is that this is actually currently zoned as industrial, and we're showing it as residential because of that the topographical constraints that seem to suggest it probably would be nicer hillside housing than industrial in a place that's currently forested and not functioning as industrial. There also is a suggestion that came out of the design week in which this 40-acre plot might be ideal in the future for some kind of a UGB land swap.
Urban growth boundary.
Or urban growth boundary swap or addition. So it's 40 acres. We've also noted, we've still colored this out as the industrial that it is today. But this 20 acres at the bottom half, while this is all pretty much being used and cleared, has been cleared of trees and forests, this still remains as forested and up in some pretty rough hills. The suggestion has been maybe this gets swapped out and this gets added in as more of this mixed use and industrial. Also opening up opportunities for some street connections that could create a variety of different opportunities for parallels to the highway. Now, these are not bypasses. These are just local streets. These are, I'll show you what the street sections will look like. They're regular old streets that have on-street parking and sidewalks, street trees, and a couple of lanes. Nothing more than that. So they're slow moving.
Can you point out the open space?
The open space network from Spyglass in the south to Agnes Creek in the north. This provided, working on this central area here of the gap, provided an opportunity to find connections. Are there natural trailway systems that could be brought down through? And so we worked through this fairly constrained area and found that here is Baldy Creek. Baldy Creek is flowing down through underneath the current gravel and rock Santa gravel operation. It's been piped some years ago. And then it is in that drainage in between the highway and the several businesses that are along this edge. It runs down along, there's a couple of other tributaries that flow down into it. At this point, it goes under the highway, and then we all know it pretty well behind the Nelscott Strip, and it drains out to the ocean. So this provides some opportunities either on this side of the highway, along the pathway that is already built now of the ODOT facility. If there's opportunities for crossing here, coming into what we're calling a slip lane, rather a frontage access road, frontage access lane, to get the terminology right. Something that would be just on the east side of Baldy Creek and facing out to the highway. Now, in a sense, it already the nucleus of it's already existing there in front of Charter, and we were just out there.
Grove Gates.
Grove Gates, and the several businesses that are there. We literally were out there 2 hours ago between meetings, checking it again, verifying. Because that's what we've been doing a lot of over these past months, is verifying certain elements like this. Between those existing buildings and the drop-off that goes into Baldy Creek, you have, in all cases there, they have put some amount of parking, or some kind of a lane, or there is actually, down in this section, a pretty nice new bike path that was installed. Yes?
Does the plan contemplate residential right next to where Morris Construction, where the old Devil's Lake Rock was in the asphalt plant?
You're talking about this area here?
Right at 23rd.
Yeah. So this is 23rd.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's industrial there.
But it's marked mixed use, so it could either be, one of the things that this plan would do is take a new tack. We're all familiar in planning the last hundreds of years in the United States of Euclidean or use-based zoning. So this endeavor proposed in her grant application to the state that we look at a performance or more a form-based code, which cares less about what is inside the building as opposed to what it looks like to the pedestrian on the street or to the traveler. So while this is zoned mixed use, it could actually be either theoretically some residential with some commercial. That area there, we know, has had interest from large format retailers. So we expect to see probably retail in the northern portion there, south of 23rd. But by zone, it could be either. Do you have a recommendation there?
Well, it's an unsightly thing that you can't help but see.
Yeah.
And it's got that huge big area where they've been digging in and taking all the sand. I'm just wondering, how could that possibly be butting up against a residential area?
Right, okay, well, so you have a lot of
In
opinions
its
on
current
that.
state, it would be a lousy place to live.
That's right.
In its current state. And we sat down and talked with the owners of the Santa Gravel operation, as well as actually, I don't know, we have half a dozen
We
meetings
should
with
have
different
mentioned that
properties.
this plan was built on first the ecology and then also working with the landowners. So there's several layers in here. So we did sit down and work with, there's several property owners and your large property owners that we folded their plans into this plan. So, but in particular, that would be a redevelopment of that area. So that would be, they've expressed an interest to not necessarily be there, but that's the only place they can be currently in the city. It's the only place zoned for it, even in the region.
Well, they're in the county.
Right, thank you, in the community, thank you. So, but it's the only industrial zone that they can fit in the area. So if there are other options, this is where the EOA comes in handy. You're looking at the citywide economic opportunities analysis. If other areas open up where they can put their equipment, et cetera, they might choose this for redevelopment because it is such a prized parcel in Nelscott and Lincoln City.
For instance, we illustrated here, because again, this is an illustrative plan, precisely what is here, where the road is aligned, whether it's up the hill a little here or there. Further study would be done, but we very carefully worked through with a topographical map and very, very carefully by hand laid in these roads and these alignments along the slopes. In the same way, we illustrated some ideas like this is a big box. It's a semi-big box, sort of a medium-sized box. They probably asked for,
I think it's 60,000. Our code says that's the largest footprint that we would allow currently.
so we drew a 60,000 square foot box right there. It's about an acre and a half.
Which could be 2 stories of 60, so 120 total.
Yeah.
Could be 3, couldn't it?
Could be 3.
Yeah.
Yes, it could.
Could do that, like I don't know if any of you come to the Hawthorne district in Portland, but there's actually a 2-story Fred Meyer's there. It's not the only 2-story big box in the country or in the region. And what we've also done here is lining. You've seen these dark red edges to this block. What we're doing is lining those blocks and facing out to the streets with liner buildings. Now, you see liner buildings basically in shopping centers, or you see them on old main streets in old downtowns. They're basically buildings that are much less deep than a big box, that have a good front. They could be 2 or 3 stories with residences or offices above, or they could be 1-story retail, with the mix being horizontal, meaning instead of vertical mixed use, you've got an apartment or houses that are just on the other side, on the back of the block. So this probably would be a great location for retail right here, but it could be a good place for housing, row houses, or small apartments. Townhomes.
You might just point out the parking, so it's not lost. There's parking all the way through the plan, just the hatching that's not in the dark maroon. It's the parking area throughout along the streets.
Right. The centers of the blocks off of alleyways that are in here is where the parking goes. There's on-street parking, however, also on all streets. We really emphasize that. When you have a street, use it for parking your car. Transition from being a driver to a pedestrian. Right there at the curb. Instead of creating collectors and arterials, sometimes in a lot of jurisdictions where they say, we want to keep the cars moving fast, so we don't want any cars parked on the streets here. And the results are is you end up with commercial strips because the parking lots are right in the front of the buildings. By putting on-street parking on the street and then having liner buildings right up to the sidewalk, you can then put additional parking in the middle of the block off of alleyways. You get essentially what you see in old towns, from villages to cities.
But do you understand what he's talking about with liner buildings? So when you're walking down the street, you would see, tell us what you would see when you walk down it.
Actually, let me jump up
Yes.
to the only slip lane.
Yeah.
Because it really shows it right here.
Yeah.
This is what I mean by liner buildings. These are buildings simply lining onto a sidewalk, onto a street, with a parked car here. It looks like it's angling out a little bit. And then there is more parking on the back side of these buildings. Because these buildings are maybe 30, 40 feet deep. It could vary in depth.
So the big box either could be part, and one side of it could be part of this front, and people would enter there, or it could be set right in the middle of the block, as he showed on the map.
We'll bring some pictures in May, so we hope that after your guidance tonight, we'll come back for a public meeting and then another briefing of the Project Advisory Committee in May. One of the liner building developments I always think about is the Beaverton Town Square Fred Meyer up in the Portland metro area, but it's lined with Chase Bank and other small shops around, and then you have the giant parking lot, and then Fred Meyer's kind of in the middle, but from the street then you see this inviting retail neighborhood. So it is a different look and feel, and it accomplishes probably more square foot for retail than a traditional development just on a pad with the building inside.
Orenco Station in Hillsborough, if any of you have been there, actually has a New Seasons that's integrated into the block, and it has liner buildings into a main street and parking again off to the back.
So we'll bring some photos, so it's a better illustration. We should push on, though. We have an evening of tech memos ahead of us. We don't want to delay. Sir, please, Commissioner.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned perhaps restoring sections of Baldy Creek. Are the headwaters of Baldwin Creek in the industrial zone, or are they further east of that?
I think they're further east. Isn't that your impression, Rich? Yeah. Further east up the hills, yeah. So that's just been buried, but the idea is to daylight with redevelopment if possible. So the next one, I think we're on to the next slide. There you go.
So the next is, you can see, we transformed it into a more computer-generated diagram, more of a it is the land use and transportation diagram. Those same zones that we were speaking about, vertical and horizontal mixed use, in the hatched red and the unhatched red, village community in the orangey color, so it's rising up the hill, and then hillside residential toward the top. And as we go further on into one of the tech memos, you'll see that we have made some proposals then of what each of those colors mean in terms of the form-based coding concept instead of merely the Euclidean land use approach to coding. It says that, down in this core area generally, buildings can be more vertical, more boxy, more compacted together. So they can be things like apartments or row houses. They can have ground floor retail and upper floor office, or they can be simply, as I said, single story retail if desired. And they're closer together. The lots can be smaller and tighter. They can be more attached. As you go up into the orange, it might be more of a mix of duplexes, a couple of single family, still some row houses, still a couple of smaller apartment buildings. And then finally, toward the tops of the hills where there's more topography, more views most likely as well, that this would be single family. More of the woods that are still there might be retained. Or single family houses, a little less design guidance and more of sort of a design freedom that you would have as you go further up from the core. Again, you can see here the slip lane, the frontage access lane. Previously, at the design week, we had a crossing through this area where these tributaries come down. We've looked closer. We decided looks like that's probably going to be a little too difficult, expensive to make that crossing of the wetter area. So we have clipped that off there. We have also, you will see, this is 23rd, where there's been anticipation at some point of a signal being there, and that being the main way in and out, that maybe there could be an addition of a 25th Street connection. But we're showing it dotted here because there are some questions about it. It is actually through the existing hill. This is dependent upon the sand and gravel operation themselves, if not a developer in the future, leveling down the northern and western corner of that hill in order to create more of a building pad up here, or maybe even leveling that down. A good portion of this has already been stripped off of the forest, trees, and it seems like, from appearances, something's got to be done to that hillside, either in reparation of it or further removal so that there's more of a flat, buildable pad there, which was very much to their interest.
I think you were also making the point, Lawrence, that with that you would achieve continuance of the access lane north. It would mean that something big would need to change there. That hill would have to continue to come down as a environmentalist at heart. I fight the urge to say don't change anything that's actively being excavated by the company, and could happen in the future with a major redevelopment proposal here. As Lawrence said, we've shown on city's guidance, we've shown 23rd as the main collector here rather than this, because in the 20 horizon, this may or may not happen. So we've shown it in the longer term with the dotted line. But Lawrence, if you wouldn't mind describing this, why else do you place it here with the relationship to the east side of the west side of the highway?
Yes, there's this odd little triangle, which is really quite high up on the bluff there. There's a good bit of a hill here. Agnes Creek comes down, comes down into this corner. There is a dip in the land right around there. If you drive along there, you'll see the slope.
Drainage, yeah.
The drainage comes right down into there. And you can just barely see the topo lines actually there. And it was on a walk. We did a couple of walks with property owners, various staff members, and consultants up and down the road here on both sides, and really evaluated where connections seem feasible, this whole notion of the frontage access lane, And then the possibility came up during one of those walks of making an entrance up through Agnes Creek at that low point. It could connect across or not, and it could get an access point up that hill, and then eventually come back down. Otherwise, it would only be simply a cul-de-sac coming up to serve this property. We try not to do cul-de-sacs, frankly. They bottle up circulation, they don't flow, they don't move through.
I would just say, if I may, Lawrence, are there any questions on this basic diagram before we dive deeper into some of the street network? If not, please, sir, yeah.
Just one. This seems to me like we're cloning the same kind of development that takes place in many other places inland, away from the ocean. And we're kind of a unique community, and our design is not necessarily like the clone designs. And I'm wondering if you're taking that into consideration in the way you're figuring the development of this.
You mean, and what is unique to this place and this land and this and Nelscott and Lincoln City?
Right.
Well, it's interesting. I also would harken back to Lawrence, some of your early presentations on the village character of historic Nelscott. So a lot of the precedent examples for some of the architecture, both at Olivia Beach and in the form-based code suggestions you have in Memo 6, come from the historic precedents of Nelscott. Certainly there's some national best practices for walkability and economically vibrant districts. But those are almost like time-true tested, village-based models that, I won't say Beaverton again, but there's some, and that's not necessarily our example. I was just thinking of what's it called, the liner building model to show you next time. But this is, so Lawrence, what do you look to as you design a new community like this? Yeah.
So we looked first of all right where we were sitting during that design week, which was the Nelscott Strip. And we said, this is fantastic, particularly what was done here just recently in partnership with ODOT and Lincoln City in formalizing that slip lane there. It really brought it up quite a few notches and has made that a formalized parking in front without it being on a highway, without it feeling like a commercial strip. So very unique to Nelscott is that idea that we then cloned up onto the frontage here. So I think that's the first thing of what's unique to this place is that we've created a front door to this whole neighborhood built upon this idea of this frontage slip lane with Baldy Creek right there, fit it right into that. One of the other aspects here is that these roads are very carefully aligned into the topography. So it's not just kind of like lay some squiggly roads down. This was really fitting it all together.
I think the small block orientation, there are some best practice sort of building blocks of pattern of both existing Nelscott, which is a historic district, but historic districts nationally, yeah.
Well, there's blocks and there's streets here. And the sizes of these blocks are roughly the kinds of sizes of blocks and street network that you see, repeated up here. So more curvy, though, as you get up into the hills. So there's this idea, Kirsten very quickly used the word transect. That's an ecological idea of cutting a section, and it works beautifully when you take an example of cutting a section from the ocean up into the hills. That's a very long transect of about, a mile across here or half a mile. But you can also take a transect right from where the waves are breaking in the ocean, and there's certain crabs that live down there. You go a little higher up, like 2 feet up in elevation and 20 feet in, and there's other little animals and bugs that are living there. You go a little further, you're getting into the grasslands. You go further up. There's that idea of transitions in a natural ecology. It's the same sort of thinking that we're doing here through an urban neighborhood, so that the streets down here are very kind of rectilinear and sharp in a more urban environment. As you get further up into the hills, they become more sinuous because the hills just naturally make them that way.
So we're thrilled to think too about the market conditions in Lincoln City. And that's one of the reasons we changed to this vertical and horizontal mixed use, recognizing that we're not going to prescribe, and the development will dictate, the market will dictate what developers can garner, whether it's a higher demand for housing or retail and commercial space. So we've left the form open, the use open, while discussing more the form of what goes in there. So it hopefully doesn't seem as prescriptive as, doesn't seem overly prescriptive, but it's trying to build a pattern into which development can happen that is locally based. But if we seem to be getting off track, let us know.
Kirsten, it seems as though the market's going to dictate most, if not all, of what we're proposing here.
It will. Ultimately, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
It seems to me it
Yeah,
does.
yeah. None of us have even enough pockets to build this out. So, yeah, it's a very delicate private-public balance. So what the public sector does, including with this grant, is helping to pre-design this. So some of the property owners, while they had preliminary plans, this actually advances some of their plans and creates some continuity of the road system between there and the next property. So it actually becomes a more buildable, developable neighborhood than they would have piecemeal. So hopefully that's a benefit and a value to the property owners as well. We should probably switch to the transportation network if that's okay. Is that all right? Thank you.
So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of streets. One is the existing highway in red. Queuing streets in green, which are the narrowest of the streets. And it means that you've got two cars coming together head on, and one pulls off a little bit. It's the narrowest local street, but it comes right out of your transportation system plan. The one-way slip lane, which is our frontage lane. Actually, I want to take that for a
I know, definitely. Modify that.
We've changed the terminology.
That'd be
It's called the
consistent,
frontage.
yeah.
Because it's the front of the neighborhood. That's the way to remember it. It's the front door to the neighborhood.
There you go, thank you.
Is this frontage lane. And then the neighborhood connector, that is the main road running through. We will show you a cartoon of the street section through it. And that's the one that, is the most clear and connected through. Comes close to being like a collector, which is common. But we like to change the word a little bit to make it unique to this place. And then finally, the alleyways are these blue lines. They are in the middle of the block, the backs of the houses, the backs of the houses. And just to get an idea of what alleyways are like, I guess the only place we probably have them in the city are here in Olivia Beach. So you can see how the alleyway becomes the access to the back garages. Carriage houses, actually, detached accessory dwelling units can be on the back of the lots. And that provides beautiful street fronts as a result of not having garage doors on the fronts of your streets because they come around the back. And those are only 20 feet wide, those alleyways. You could bring a fire truck down and set up right there in an alleyway and fight a fire from the back as well as the front. So you'll also notice that there are no dead ends anywhere. There's no cul-de-sacs here. We really advise that you eliminate cul-de-sacs from this neighborhood planning because you can always connect to something else. There's very rare circumstances in which you come to a little peninsula maybe of land that there's only one way in and one way out. So everything connects to everything else, and you get a network that is great for walking, biking, fire access, emergency access, because you can always get to every single house from at least 2 directions. So it's a real network. It's a web. Move on. This is the frontage lane down on Baldy Creek. So this is the highway running by. That's the steep slope we were talking about on the other side. Here is the drainage. We're showing this a little cut back here, but this is actually photographed from a portion in front of the telecommunications charter. That is pretty much where charter sits in relationship to the edge where it starts dropping down. What we're proposing here in this particular illustration, although there could be a couple of variations on it, is a soft path, maybe drop down a little bit from the road, is a curved line, one way of travel in this direction, and then parking up along the curve. Now, that would basically fit within from that existing building to the edge, but we very well could do, in other situations where you don't have an existing building, very easily, do more of a formal sidewalk that is a paved sidewalk. Some have suggested maybe there should be a little retaining wall right there, retaining wall that cuts down into the drainage, but it could also be something you could sit on and look out into the drainage. There could be parallel parking.
If I may, about that retaining wall, that's one of the things that ODOT is considering, and Stephanie from staff has asked is, will ODOT require a retaining wall if it's part of the highway system? So there's benefits. We're still in a liminal phase here, deciding with ODOT whether or not this frontage access lane would actually be considered part of the highway network. If it is, it would be eligible for state street enhancement funds. If it's not, then we fall back to just a regular redevelopment scenarios with private property owners. So that's one of the reasons we're trying to be careful about calling it an alley, a frontage access lane, so that it's an access, an alternate access to take some travel off the highway. So that's one of the strategies there. And the city raised whether or not it'd be necessary to have some, if ODOT would require, if it's considered part of their right of way, lightly, or part of their management zone, if they would require a barrier, they're protecting the creek.
If I could also add, because of the topography there, the cross-section may vary a little bit. Now, the parking may not be enough room for parking in some of the areas, but the idea is there would be, ideally, the trail, parking and a lane of traffic, but the parking may come and go.
Next one. I think we have the full cross-section. There you go. So, yep. So that's what Richard is referring to, that 7-foot parking lane is probably, it could also be in the back. If there was a property where it just isn't, likely to redevelop and that building is going to stay there, then the parking could be in the back instead of in the front. But ideally, this is the basic cross-section.
Ideally, you've got parking in the front. It would only be if there's one existing or two existing buildings. They've got to stay there. You're going to renovate that building. We want to see what we can fit in here. Ideally, you have to have one way to travel and a good sidewalk. And hopefully a good sidewalk over here. This is the kind of, this distance away from the highway, particularly with the Jersey barrier that has been built there now. It's noisy as heck walking on that sidewalk there. It feels dangerous just to have the trucks whizzing by. Over here, though, it's much calmer. I could actually imagine, cafe seating sitting out here, looking out with new trees growing here, seeing across to over the stream, and then the hills up off the distance.
We are at time, so we should probably head into Tech Memo 4. If there are no other questions or comments on that basic diagram, the basic elements, we did spend a lot. We've sort of become obsessed with this access lane because it's, there were questions about its feasibility geometrically. So we've been really, Deborah mentioned we took some extra weeks to respond to staff comments about this just to make sure it was feasible. And then with the trade-off, the fallback to Plan B. In some cases, if the existing building weren't to redevelop, the option would be to have parking in the rear. But if there any other comments before we press on into the meat of these memos? Counselor?
I do, but so correct me if not the time or cover later, but looking at the graphics, it seems to touch roadways, and I like that, but as you know, we're starting through budget time again, and so on my mind is the expense of public utilities, water and sewer, and in high elevations, graded elevation. And I'm just wondering, during your consideration of roadways, are we taking into consideration, the utility element of utilities going in the streets, or, and I'm thinking of pump stations of $1 million a whack. And it's easy to say, don't worry, the developer pays for them. But we know those blend into the cost of the lot, cost of the house. So I guess the question is there a time when consideration goes into the plan about where utilities are placed? Maybe they don't need to be placed in roadways as traditionally are, but we had trunk easements or some other way to help reduce cost? Long questions and statements, but is there a time when that stuff comes into play?
Yes. In about 20 minutes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. No, that's great segue. And if you don't mind, we'll just stay on transportation for a moment, then we'll
Oh, you
get into
bet.
water, sewer, transportation, and storm. So if I may, on this, for a minute here, on this tech memo, that really was DKS's lead. They're the firm that did your transportation system plan, which I think was adopted recently.
2015.
15, yeah, probably started in 2012 or 2013. Yeah. But more recently, just adopted last year. But they looked at, so DKS analyzed some key intersections, assessed conditions for walking and biking, identified some preliminary transit locations. We want to do some additional work on that, and then recommended some mitigation strategies. So if we could use actually the memo, forward is down. The memo itself to walk through. So Tech Memo 4, it has this DKS logo on it. And just would like to spend, 15 minutes or so on this one. Trusting that, I know you all are, busy is an understatement, so maybe just touch on it together. Part of what the transportation team has to do is to analyze it consistent with both ODOT standards and also to assign trips. So within this study area, they've just assumed 200 houses and about 600 employees over the study period, over the 20 years. So it's pretty conservative vis-a-vis the land area. It anticipates relatively a low growth of development in the study area. It could be faster, but for the timeline, really, we're assuming that most of the development actually happens outside the 20-year timeline. So it's truly a long-range plan, which takes some of the concern about how the funding and financing of the infrastructure comes into play too. It's a very long-range plan. So this first couple pages just restates the study area and the road network that Lawrence just reviewed. It describes that attribution of the units and the employees so that then they can model how that would perform against the traffic network. They use the work of the 2035 horizon that you use in your 2015 TSP, as well as this that gap update with the 220 households and 634 employees. So they pump that through their model into the system and analyze these key intersections on page 5 there in figure 2. And they speak in a language that is not intuitive to me, but those arrows and numbers mean something to them, and they're able to interpolate those for us into what the needed improvements would be. So they, this next few pages really are methodology. So you can read that and send us comments. Comments are welcome anytime in the next week. But on that table 2 on page 8, you see which of those intersections, the results of all those arrows, did not perform too well. And really the main one that is of concern is that item number 3. It is the US 101 and 23rd Drive intersection. And like the intersection at 32nd that you just signalized, it will need an exception to mobility standards at the Oregon Transportation Commission. So you have, I'm just stating things you live and know every day, so much transportation, so many trips happening on 101, that even with an improvement like a light, it still fails the moment the light goes in. And that's what happened at 32nd, you probably recall. It's a very helpful improvement, but it doesn't fix anything, it just sort of manages the system. So same thing up at 23rd, they're recommending a light up there. It would still fail, so we would need to go seek an exception at the Oregon Transportation Commission for that, but the basic fact remains is we need a light there for people to get safely in and out of the employment area. So it would just be an exception to state mobility standards. So the team described those intersections on the next few pages. And,
Pardon me, Kirsten.
Thank you, yeah.
On page 8,
Yep.
level of service on the chart,
Yes.
F and E refers to,
Those are not good marks, yeah, those are, but they're.
that's A, B, C, D.
That's right, yeah. So they're considered failing, and many busy intersections around the state fall into that. In fact, they're going more away from that, school report card rating system, more towards that volume to capacity ratio in the third column from the right there. With the red numbers, the 98, 97, the 1.5 is really, they're using that, really the V over C ratio more commonly now than the than the letter rating. It really tells us more, it's a more of a sensitivity analysis, not just that we're failing, but how badly are we failing. And keep in mind, it's because you're popular, so that's why we're failing. That's right.
Generally, in the TSP, we just agree to accept the fact that we are going to have congestion at certain times, and then it's a matter of how much congestion and or well, not even how much, but for how long. So, yeah.
And how you manage it then through lights and other signalized solutions. Otherwise, you have basically the extreme version of a main street, of course, running through your city. So there's whole, exceptions available to when a highway is your main street type treatment. So this is one of them, is signalizing. It doesn't fix the problem, it allows for safe passage across.
And if I could just
Yeah,
add
please.
in, there's, how do you fix a problem like that? Do you just keep widening the road? You just keep adding more lanes?
Well, you decided not to.
You just keep on filling them out, and you made the right decision, I would say, as a not a traffic engineer, but you made the right decision saying it's going to be 3 lanes, that's it, we don't need the 5. But now you have the opportunity to make parallel streets. This Fleet Street connection, or Foothills Boulevard, as we're calling it, that's the solution. That's the extra lanes. It's not a fatter, wider road, it's more connectivity.
It's a smarter, a more redundant system. So that's the solution.
So there's
for no step. Yep. So there's just a few other recommendations that DKS made. There's on page 11, there's reclassifying a few streets. So 23rd, your industrial area would become a collector. And we'll talk about the design of the collectors in a moment. But for the purpose of this plan, that's probably the most, our collectors will become, this is a weak version of the city's pointer. Have I lost it? There we go. Oh, right up here, thank you. So the main collectors in the study area would be 23rd, and then also this new Lee Street extension or Foothills Drive coming down. And those we would, in adoption of this plan, it would come first to Planning Commission, then to Council. You would amend your transportation system plan and classify those as collectors for the purpose of this neighborhood plan. So you would upgrade them to collectors. And we'll talk about the design of them in a moment. And then the 101 frontage access lane would be a principal arterial associated with Highway 101. All other remaining streets would be local streets. And there's a reclassification of 23rd Drive from the entrance to the industrial area as a local street. I think it is just this end piece there, and 4. So in walking and biking, there's a few, Lawrence went through this, the whole plan is guided by a pedestrian-friendly, walkable, economically vibrant district. But for the purpose of the transportation system plan, there's a few reclassifications shown at the top of page 12. They're mentioning in that middle section there's some deficiencies in sidewalks and bikeways, and frankly, those would be improved as the redevelopment of the Nelson Gap area happens over the next 50 years. So it just sort of describes in narrative how this would be built out. You'll see these project improvements. Council was asking about sort of the cost and how these are built. You'll see the quantification of these improvements in Tech Memo 5 coming up next. So the dollar estimates per street section coming up in Tech Memo 5. So the traffic signals along 101 are quite a big deal. There's a tension, obviously, between the ability for pedestrians and residents and employees to cross 101 vis-a-vis, the state's need and the, interstate need for north-south travel along 101. So the 4 intersections are proposed, and they are described there on page 13. So they are, 19th, 23rd, so going to north-south, 19th, 23rd, 29th would be a flashing beacon crossing, and 32nd, you have your existing light. So there'd be 4 formal crossings that we propose in the study area. ODOT is still contemplating those, so I just want to put a placeholder that we may hear that they would like to remove one of those, but we feel that, frankly, from a district perspective, 4 makes sense. So we're recommending that, and they're investigating that currently. In terms of transit, your transit provider sits on the Project Advisory Committee. Cinda was here this afternoon, and we talked about in the final plan having a little bit more of a call out on transit. Right now, this just describes a narrative that it would be an extension of the Lincoln City Loop, but also connecting up Foothills Drive to the industrial area. So I'd like to actually show a different diagram specific to the transit system and identify where perhaps some of the main stop locations would be vis-a-vis the plan area, such as around, the center of the new the district in here around the park, and then up to certainly up to connect to the industrial corridor, possibly over time they go out and come back around 2035 as well. So on street design, just wrapping up, page 13. So we talked about this main collector, Southeast Foothills Boulevard, is a major design element. The east-west collector, 23rd, and then the frontage access lane are these important collectors and arterials in the system. And by designating them as collectors, my financial consultant tells me that they become SDC eligible and that you can pay for them with your system development charges because they benefit the entire system. They're not local roads. So that's one benefit of designating them as collectors as opposed to simply a neighborhood road. And Lawrence has come with some design recommendations so that they're not just simply traffic dominant, but they also function as places for people in the neighborhood as well. So trying to accomplish multiple objectives with this designation of Foothills in particular as a collector. So the summary of improvements is there on table 4. Please let me know if you have any questions about those.
And you can see that the numbers coordinate with the numbers on the map up here.
And in the memo, yeah. The project advisory team wanted us to note in particular transit improvements associated with project numbers 1, 8, and 11. And so we'll be taking another look at those transit enhancements. Cinda made an appeal to us that the more we can describe in this memo for transit makes it easier for her to seek funding from state and federal agencies for future transit improvements. So the further we can go here will make her efforts all the stronger. So thank you for a quick overview of the transportation system improvements. Its sister memo is memo number 5, if you could look at that.
Houston, before we do 4,
Absolutely.
on page 1 of number 4.
Yeah.
Second sentence at the top, this transportation element refines the 2035 transportation system plan. 2035 transportation system plan is already in existence.
Yeah, it's the one you adopted in 2015.
We've been calling it the 2015, but it is a 20-year plan.
I should probably correct that, just so it's...
Yeah, we'll make it consistent.
Okay, yeah, and Bridget's pointing out that we call it both right there, so thank you. So she 2015 in both cases, thank you, Councilor.
And in the memo from Ms. Deborah, in the last sentence of the first paragraph, Transportation Planning Analysis Unit of the Oregon Department of Transportation tested the transportation elements and other ODOT staff vetted them as well. What were the test results and what did the vetting consist of?
Oh, well, that's our TPOW analysis. DKS DKS developed a plan. Then they ran it through TPOW, and they do more modeling testing on it, just to see whether or not it's going to do what we think it's going to do, whether it's going to cause problems either in the neighborhood or on the highway.
What is TPOW?
Transportation Planning and Analysis Unit at ODOT.
He just said it.
Yeah.
Chester just said it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so anyway, then let me see, what else did I say? Oh, and then Kirsten's been referring to, ODOT has been checking some of the things that we're proposing to make sure that they work for them, that they're consistent with their policies. So that's what I mean by...
Have we gotten results?
Well, this table two, sir, is probably the biggest one, where we have the success and failures. So it's that table two where we know that we're failing, and so what are we going to do about it? So that significant failure at 101 and 23rd, we need to take the Oregon Transportation Commission to get an exception to the state mobility standard. So that's some of that regulatory red flag checking that we're sending the whole plan through. And this, I think I'm waiting finally to hear back from David Helton, who is our ODOT designee on the project. He's been very helpful. He's super supportive of the plan. So he's running shuttle to his internal agency, advocating for certain elements of the plan. He feels it's a strong mixed-use area, but whether or not we can retain those 4 signal lines, 4 signal plus linking light crossings, that's one thing he's checking. Also checking whether or not we indeed would need, the barriers between that frontage access lane and the creek or not. So he's just checking some final things, because again, when we bring it to you for adoption this summer, we want to have all those checks done. And you can from ODOT's perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
One of the concerns I have is that right now Highway 101 is overused. And so now we're talking about developing over time yet another pocket of people, and we're talking about a large number. And then we talk about having this highway, the road that goes through the collector.
Yep.
And then it dies and goes into a little kind of a lane. And the object to me is to get more traffic off of 101 and finding a way, an alternate way to get north and south.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have that real narrow lane where you've got to pull over to let the other car go by, you're defeating the purpose.
But that pulling off is only happening in the most residential streets at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
The main Foothills Boulevard is
That's a
two
two-lane.
lanes.
I understand that, but I thought you were talking about the one that goes up the hill later on.
Yeah, let's look at that one. This is a fascinating concept that we're quite taking with. I think you're referring to the Easter.
Yes.
Yeah. So this one, actually, the fire chief is telling us today, I believe he lives in this neighborhood
And
here.
so does Roger.
And so does Councilor Sprague. So this leg may or may not be feasible. You know the topography up there is it's severe. This one seems to be more feasible, but the main idea is to try and get an alternate road. Say the worst happens, we have a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, and 101 is severely compromised for a long time. So this idea of this parallel path, actually up from Taft this way, and then probably out this way, is an idea. It is outside our study area, so we haven't done extensive work on it. It's also outside the urban growth boundary, so we need a goal exception today. We've talked about possibly flipping this industrial area with this parcel, which would bring it inside your urban growth boundary and establish a way to get back up to East Sables Lake Road and out. So that's the idea, is to create that system redundancy by way of long-range planning. We know these are not inexpensive facilities to build, and I would make the case that alternate route up to East Sables Lake Road is of statewide significance because of the importance of 101.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
The ODOT has told us that a bypass is just out of the question, so forget about it.
Yeah.
And so we forgot about it. Now we got to figure out an alternate way
Yes.
to make that traffic go. And the more people that we add to the community, to our population, the worse it gets.
Yes.
As you know, our population goes from 8,000 for most of the year, except for the tourist season, and then it goes to 30, 35, 40.
Incredible.
So, we really need to be able to handle that.
Yes.
Something that came up again at the Project Advisory Committee meeting and has been coming up in our transportation system plan meetings is the idea of some kind of transit for tourists or some kind of shuttle. Today it was a shuttle idea to get people from this new neighborhood over to the coast, and without having to use their cars and then having to park their cars on the other side. And so I did mention that that was one of our priority projects in the transportation system plan, is to try to do a feasibility study for what we could use in transit or trolley or shuttle ideas that can help us move around our tourists in a financially feasible way and in a way that would be attractive enough for people to want to ride. So, we're just submitting an application for that one next month.
That's so great. We have some major studies going on, including this buildable land analysis and the housing and employment lands needs analysis. So it's all related to how to do what we're required to do as cities that have accomplished this 20-year supply of growth while maintaining livability. So looking at these multiple strategies is absolutely, the more tools you have in the toolkit, probably the better in this case. Lawrence has something else.
I just want to point out, and reiterating a little bit of what Trish was saying, but Lee Street, which is on the TSP, does not get you to Devils Lake Road today. You'd have to also have a connection up through this little dead-end stub, which has some potential, we were told, just off the map. We were studying outside of our study area to see, is this feasible? That's why these are, I personally found so attractive all the way out here, out toward the outer edge.
On the ridge, yeah,
They are
outside.
a more clean connection down to Devils Lake Road that is roughly about here that goes out and across. So all the more that this 40 acres coming in. And the reason that we showed, a connection here, a connection there, and there, is just to say, needs further study. We think something here can be done. If you can get one of these, great. If you can get two, better. If you can get three of these connections, you'd have a circulation route.
First area you talked about, that you said there's no road there now.
Yeah.
That is contemplated, and that property has been purchased, I believe it is, by the tribe.
Okay.
And they're putting their workforce housing in there, and their intention is to develop that and run that street through.
Great.
So that's
I'll
a
talk to
good one.
Pam. Great.
Could you point that street out, Lawrence?
Yeah, that's right here. So, what's the name of this street again? 19th?
That's 19.
19th comes to a cul-de-sac, but you take a left and you go up and through there. And that tribal property, we spoke with somebody that knew all about that. It was right there.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, each of those points up there, it's just fascinating. It's a little micro study you're just up in there. It's a fascinating opportunity and constraint for topography. Thank you. Okay, so are you ready for the second one? So tech memo number 5.
We need to make sure that DJ
DJ,
is
I
with
know.
us.
DJ, are you with us? DJ, if you are, let us hear a sign of life.
Call ended.
No, that's not good.
I don't want it.
Yeah, really.
Call.
You think that he was supposed to be call beginning. Sorry about that. I hope we can get it back.
Well, DJ is going to be speaking about planning level cost estimates.
Yeah, fortunately, Rich is here. with
Funding,
us.
financing.
Yeah, exactly. This is
Existing
what.
sources and potential new sources.
Yeah, those are the. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
And that's our tech memo 5. Okay.
DJ, are you on the speaker here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we can. Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't here when you talked and it's something else.
Welcome back.
This is 6 here.
If anyone else needs a 5, there's some more 5s in the back of the room. Counselor, yeah, thank you. Great. So I want to also recognize Rich Catlin from Reese and Associates who helped with almost every piece of this memo except for the narrative. So thank you, Rich, for being here with us and bring us back to get off track. DJ, I'll just walk through the beginning pieces, but then the interesting stuff, I'll be turning it back over to you. So this memo identifies the costs and funding sources with all the attributes we just talked about. So all the major civic improvements we just talked about should be touched on here, leaving really no questions by the time it comes to Planning Commission and Council this summer. So I'm just going to touch on them and leave it with you. If you haven't had a chance to read it, please still do. Have a strong cup of coffee and just read all the way through. Let us know what your questions are. It is pretty dense, and I know DJ took a major rerun at it after comments from the city, so I appreciate that. So this describes first the transportation improvements. If you could go to the next slide, Lawrence, that would be awesome. And it's summarized in this table, but we're talking first about the major transportation improvements, the frontage access lanes, and this is just going through DJ's findings and his, mental gymnastics, trying to figure out how many funding sources you could, bundle together to help build this frontage access lane. And we talked about if it's part of the state highway system, you'd be eligible for street enhancement funds, ODOT state enhancement funds. On 23rd, the construction costs do not include right-of-way cost acquisition, but they're just the cost to construct the street from Reese and Associates calculations. So,
7 million plus,
yeah, on the 23rd.
23rd.
Yeah, exactly. So these are not inexpensive collectors. So these are major streets for your roadway system into the employment area. The Foothills Boulevard Neighborhood Connector, which would be designated as a collector on your transportation system plan, making it SDC eligible. So those are the three main transportation, system-wide transportation elements that would be, that you'd have public investment in as well as the private investment. The public works improvement include the water system improvements, and Lila Bradley is here, Public Works Director, and is intimately much more familiar with these items than I am. But Reese and Associates helped us find that there is a, zone 3 in your water map there on page 5, your water service zones now that council was just speaking to the need for either moving or constructing new reservoir system. Lila, would you mind just describing that in human terms for us? That would be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's page 5.
Yes, page 5, yeah. On page 5, if you look at zone 3, we were looking at some future water system upgrades that we'll have to do. And then these are quite a ways out, 5 to 10 years. Our Southeast 19th and Lee Reservoir is 2 million gallon reservoir that will need to be, refurbished probably within that time frame. And so we would look at possibly moving that to this zone 3. And in doing that, it could possibly serve the entire zone, this project, plus the area that it serves now. And so it's futuristic, but that would be one way to serve this area at the higher elevations of this area.
And the zones indicate elevation, correct?
Correct. So that higher elevation definitely has to have the reservoir, and the lower zone 3 would need a pump station, at least for the water system there. And
Lila, would you be using the same system we're talking about around Devil's Lake to supply would it be a gravity flow for sewer?
Well, we're talking about water.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
But, it would just be a normal gravity system in the water, from the reservoir, and so it would serve that area without a pump station. I think right now we're looking at Southeast 19th Street Reservoir, moving the pump station, the water booster station that's on this new street that they were just talking about near the tribal property. There's a pump station there that needs to be moved. We were looking at moving that pump station to the 19th Street Reservoir area. And so if you're looking at this, in a bigger picture, we just have to look at where we put that particular pump station. But the reservoir, when you upgrade a reservoir like that, you end up doing the seismic and everything. So it's something we'd need to look at our reservoir anyway. So it would be a good timing to help service this area.
So I keep flipping through, but is this the location of one of the facilities that you're speaking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a location of what?
The reservoir now,
The existing,
Southeast 19th.
19th and Lee. That's right. Thank you.
We propose making a park around it, going little lanes around it, connecting out to the streets as well. It's for fun.
A lot of people, vary theirs to play tennis on it.
Yeah, exactly. They can be assets for sure. Okay, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, everyone. Now I've lost connection entirely. Oh, no. That's fine. Sorry. Trying to get the wrong way. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, please, if you don't mind, would you like me to hit the sewer? Thank you.
Well, the sewer, I believe, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but would be a gravity system. Our system in the highway now is large enough to handle this area. And so there would be quite a bit of piping, just like the water, all piping in the streets in the storm, that our system could handle.
Could it handle both the North Gap development and Devil's Lake?
That's what we Well, the Devil's Lake, yes. Yep, because we were looking at very low impacts on the East Lake sewer project.
So the project 7 and 8 up there, we're looking at just refinement plans, I think, for both of these elements. Is that right? So within the next 5 years, it's interpolating what exactly is needed. So that short-term cost is to actually figure the solution for the actual construction improvement. Thank you, Governor. Rich, please.
And bearing in mind, one of the findings of the report is that there's time in the next 5 to 10 years to do that analysis for where to put the reservoir, where to put the sewer connections, because there's plenty of road in zone 2 to accommodate 20 years of growth that's planned, as well as plenty of road for the sewer connections. So we have time to study, make sure we make the right decisions to accommodate that growth that's beyond the 20-year horizon.
Great. Any questions on just water, sewer, or storm today? The stormwater facilities is described on page 8 there, and the stormwater master plan is currently in the process of being updated. If I would summarize correctly, DJ, to say that we don't expect, we're trying to not encumber any new fees in this area beyond existing system development charges. So to keep things affordable by using the proxy of existing SDC rates to fund and finance the improvements in the study area. So no special SDC charges in this area, just trying to keep it current water, sewer, storm rates, transportation rates. So
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just for all of the FTC fees, parts of current fees are being re-examined. But and filling truck improvements in the Nelson area will be factored into those rates when they get updated. But as far as water, sewer, storm, and transportation, there's nothing in this area that is so extraordinarily expensive that it is atypical of what one might expect to pay for in the way of SBC improvements anywhere else in Lincoln City. The only caveat there is whether it's the sewer connection to the big interceptor and Highway 101. That's going to be kind of a tricky design because those have to go under or over the creek. And so designing that is proposed in a refinement plan to see whether or not that could potentially have an SDC rate impact. But all of the other improvements are pretty straightforward and would fall within the normal range of the existing improvements that your master plans have, and so from a rate standpoint, they're neutral.
Which is good news, frankly.
Kirsten?
Oh, please, yeah.
And yet, on page 12, number 7, number 8, water system, sewer system, we've got SDCs as possible funding source.
Yes, under your existing SDC rate. So no increased SDC.
No, okay.
Yeah.
And going up, number 1, 2, 3, 4, private contributions.
Mm-hmm.
Who is going to make these contributions?
Rich, do you mind if I call on you for that? I know you do a lot of development work in the city, and so when we talk about the private developer building the road, that's what we're speaking about, but maybe he can elaborate on that.
Yes.
Yeah. For the microphone, yeah, the recording. Thank you. Here goes Rich Catlin with Reese and Associates.
Yeah, certainly. The description of private contributions refers to private developers who are developing land. They have an obligation financially to provide the sewer, water, street, storm drainage that are necessary to serve their project. So they are responsible in large part through private contributions for funding those projects. And then there's opportunities for oversizing contributions from the city for SDC, those type of capital projects.
Thank you.
So I wonder if we should actually just call this private development instead of private contribution, which sounds like a fundraising drive.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. It's not philanthropic. Yes, it's a private developer. So thanks for clarifying that. That's good. Now, the parks, stay with us. I always feel better with Rich at the table. So with the parks section starting on page 9, we looked at the city park, which is that triangle park, but the basics is, as DJ just said, as part of the current park system master plan, which you're just kicking off with a great consulting team, we're looking at those improvements being SDC eligible as well. So the open spaces, there is one triangular shaped park in the middle of the plan area that we've reviewed. And that may be a specific project in the park master plan. We hope it will be. Don't leave us now, so make sure that's not in, don't forget. So the C3, I'll comment easy. So C3, the Head to Bay Trail in 3 segments there. Again, as the city is able to take those on, whether they're through grant sources or to its own funds, would depend, the construction of those would depend on the design of those stretches. So we hate to leave you with that sort of opening, but I don't think we can get any more specific at this time. Is that right, Rich?
It's design driven.
Yeah.
So whether it's just an expensive soft path or a more expensive path with lots of rooms, that's all design driven.
Yeah. Do you expect to take up that level of detail in the Park System Master Plan, the Head to Bay Trail?
Last time, in 2001, it was a dotted line.
Yeah.
And we haven't followed it in all cases because we have decided that something else would serve us better, or we had an opportunity. So, yeah, it may be the same here to some extent. But where we have identified it as part of this plan, it makes a lot of sense to have the location. And then I think that the advantage of having a hard surface path is that it is ADA. And so it qualifies, it provides us that service. And with a soft path, you also have an ongoing maintenance issue that you don't so much with a hard surface path. So those are considerations. There are probably others.
Great. And then the Baldy Creek enhancement, Leather reminded us that there's an opportunity to seek Oregon watershed enhancement grants for those sections in collaboration with the Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council and probably others, but just thinking about the ecological aspect of Baldy Creek, its own separate funding opportunity to receive attention and redevelopment. So DJ, and that you're still with us, would you like to touch at all on the existing and proposed funding sources sections? We touched a little bit on SDCs, but I know earlier we talked about TIF, and maybe you want to speak to just the other element there, B, C, and D on pages 14 and 15, or B and C, sorry.
Sure, and what I'm going to focus on, since we've kind of dealt with the SDCs in terms of their ability to pay for the planned improvements, I'm going to focus on some of the other tools in the toolbox. But I did want to preference and go back to the SDCs on one point, which is that if this area, this new neighborhood of the city is intended for workforce housing, providing some relief from the typical SDC fees by paying down those fees from an alternative source might be, it could very well be extremely important to allowing workforce housing to develop in this area. The market probably can't deliver it. If it could, it would have by now. And so one way to do that is to write down SDCs for workforce housing projects. That's a matter of policy, how you do that, and what the source is that provides that subsidy so that your SDC funds remain whole is part of what the other sources of revenue that I'm going to talk about is kind of at the heart of that. So some of those other tools that the city could employ to help reduce development costs in these areas or to enhance the amenities in the neighborhood include urban renewal, some other city tools that the city already uses, such as SDC deferrals or property tax deferrals, as well as inclusionary zoning, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then land swaps and transfer of development rights opportunities, which really gets into a kind of a completely different issue, but the concern there is that there is some development that is either currently enabled through entitlement or is envisioned that is in areas that are that are potentially hazardous. And so how do you create incentives to shift development out of those areas? So starting with urban renewal could play a pretty important role in the Nelscott area. However, it can't happen until the existing district sunsets, and it can't happen until a new district is created, and it can't happen until most of the properties that are envisioned to be in the district have been annexed to the city. So there's a lot of moving parts associated with urban renewal and how it might play a role here. That you've got about 5 years. It's expected that around 2021, the debt obligations coming from tax increment collections will have been satisfied, and the district will have could sunset at that time. Now would be a good time to start looking at how much revenue this area could generate in an urban renewal district, and given that amount of revenue, then what its purpose should be and what project you might want to use that revenue for. So urban renewal is one tool that you're familiar with and used very successfully and could play an important role in Nelscott. Second, there is a new law that was passed in the last legislative session that removes the restriction statewide against inclusionary zoning, but it comes with, I'm not going to call them, it comes with some strings. In order to use inclusionary zoning and the revenue that goes along with collecting a construction excise tax, there are certain things that the community has to do. And so I'm not going to go into a long treatise on this. It gets kind of complicated, but suffice it to say that you could kind of create a citywide inclusionary zoning program where all development is obligated to, multifamily development is obligated to provide affordable housing, but they can pay a fee in lieu of building affordable units. So the city would collect that fee in lieu, and then it could use that money to write down development costs for workforce housing in a particular neighborhood. And Nelscott could be one of those neighborhoods that you select for that. In order to really put that kind of a policy in place, you would need to do some pretty extensive work, and I think the time to do it would be as part of the housing land needs analysis that's coming up, to look at how you might use that tool to help address housing needs in this area and reduce some of the infrastructure-related development costs in Nelscott that are all listed under the Table 2 on page 12 as being financed with FTC. And then the other topic that I wanted to talk about was the use of land swaps and transfer development rights. A land swap in the UTB has already been referenced as a potential tool to use to get land that's currently designated for industrial but isn't particularly well suited to industrial use, exchanged out for other land that is better. It's about 40-acre swap. The question is, do you want to take that land that's zoned industrial out of the UGB or potentially use it for something else? And it could be that down the road you find out that that's a good area for some housing to occur, provided that housing in hazard areas that are currently entitled goes away. So there's, again, this is a big policy question. It's a potential tool that the city could use to redirect development in the city and inside the urban growth boundaries to areas that are more suitable. But it needs to be examined in the light of kind of a citywide analysis rather than just Nelscott.
So DJ, another example of this would be where we have those drainage ways, and we're showing them as green. And in order to control those without buying them as open space, we would have a transfer of development rights, which means we would pay or we would allow them to, explain how that would work.
So the property owner receives a development right in exchange for selling that land, the development rights for land, to a third party. And then the third party who would purchase those development rights, usually that needs to be sweetened with either extra density, reduced parking requirements, additional height limits, additional lift on height limits, or other things that are advantageous to them and that makes them willing to purchase the development rights from those open space areas. Oregon has not had a particularly good track record using transfer of development rights programs because our land use laws allow so much development to occur and plan it so far ahead that these incentive programs typically don't work. But they will work in circumstances where new information has come along or new planning has come along, and there's an opportunity to design the system, the land use system and the land use program, to create these incentives up front.
So one of the biggies, obviously, it's not as germane to this study area, but one of the biggies would be in the tsunami inundation zone. So a big move, north and south, just take it out of Lincoln City, anywhere along the coast in Oregon or other states for that matter. But if jurisdictions were going to say, okay, in a willing property owner situation, we're not talking about condemnation necessarily, we're talking about a willing property owner participation program that's willing to transfer the development rights to another area, using those findings to extend the UGB into farm and forest land, and just transferring development rights in large swaths from one place to another. Rich?
And the transfer of development rights is a tool that works usually from moving development rights from one area, one geographic area, to another geographic area. But there are also other mechanisms, say a modification to your PUD element in your code that would allow you to do the same kind of transfer on site so that you can set aside open space, transfer that density into a higher density within the same site.
And that would be in these green areas on the map here. So that's a potential for it. It's often used too when, for some reason, if you are overly limiting or taking the full development of any one property, which we're not doing in this case, you would definitely want to transfer that development right to another area. But in this case, you'd be just looking further to maximize or maximize the development potential of the remaining lands that aren't constrained by slope. So DJ was actually touching on a few of the methods in Tech Memo 6, so we'll pick up some speed there. But DJ, if you don't mind, still in Tech Memo 5 on page 14, you didn't necessarily touch on this interfund lending, the enterprise funds and general fund authority.
So I'm glad you asked that question, Justin, because it circles back to a comment that was made earlier. I think it was one of the council members who asked the question about timing of infrastructure, which is a great question. FDC revenue, as you know, arrives after development occurs. But the question is, are there some projects that we're looking at for this plan area that really need to be in place in advance so that development can take advantage of the plan and can move forward? And I'm not, you know your community better than I, but I think the answer to that is, for a couple of these big ticket items, the answer is yes. For example, those big sewer connections that need to occur into Highway 101, and you need to get sewage under the highway. There's a very few, limited number of properties that actually front that alignment and would benefit from that sewer, and yet they're facing some very big expenses to oversize that infrastructure. And so if the city could take it on its shoulders to build that oversized infrastructure as kind of a pump priming exercise, and then collect the revenue in arrears from everybody else as development occurs later on. But the question is, if you're going to do that, how do you finance it? How do you finance those pump priming investments? And interfund borrowing might be one way to do it. Issuing revenue bonds would be another way to do it. You're not going to be able to collateralize the bond measure with SBC receipts, but there might be some other ways to do that for a few of these projects that are really needed to get things off the ground.
Thank you. And anything else, TJ, on the prospective city financing sources starting on page 16? There's a few other options you mentioned there.
So the one you've already been talking about, actually there's two areas for new enterprise funds. One would be a stormwater management fee that the city could collect citywide and use it for stormwater improvement. That would also apply in Nelscott. And the other would be in lieu of not having a gas tax or street utility fee, where all residents would pay into a fund, and that would pay for street maintenance, and that would free up some money for capital projects out of your existing street fund. Those are, again, big policy questions that probably need to be discussed out in a broader context than just Nelscott. But if they were in place, they could play an important role in helping finance some of these capital projects. And then local and regional excise taxes. You already collect transient room tax. There could be special excise taxes for gas. I understand that went forward and didn't pass, which is in my opinion, really too bad because of how efficient it is to collect the gas tax. The gas tax statewide is collected from 6 vendors. Administratively, it is so inexpensive to collect that tax versus collecting a retail level tax program. But be that as it may, voters have kind of spoken, but there may be other opportunities for excise taxes to help with writing down affordable housing costs, such as an excise tax on sales of food and beverages. Since tourists pay that tax, an excise tax collected from them could be go into a fund and then dedicated again for affordable housing. But these kinds of big picture policy questions really are probably more appropriately examined and looked at as part of the housing land needs analysis, because all of them kind of relate back to affordable housing. The gas tax doesn't. That clearly relates to street maintenance issues and transportation capital improvements. But those are LIDs, the rest of these grants, open space, banking, the Watershed Enhancement Council grant and things like that are pretty straightforward tools that the city's made use of in the past. LIDs are
the local improvement district, thanks.
The local improvement district, and they've been used successfully. They're just staff-wise, they're expensive and labor-intensive to administer. And so if you can use other tools than an LID, I would recommend doing so. I would never try to coerce a group of voters into being part of an LID. If they want to, and that's their idea, fine. Setting up an LID can be great. But using it where you've got people that are opposed to it can become very contentious. And it would not be high on my priority list for tools to use to address needs in a limited geographic area.
So that's more of a highly localized tool, smaller than this geographic area. Well, thanks, councilors and commissioners. Any questions on that broad overview? This is the basic chart that would guide, that would come with your full draft plan. The transportation system plan needs amending, as you know, so we could phase out some of these other amendments. We know that there's a sewer and water both refinement plan that would contribute to the understanding of this, but in the short term, the lower level areas, the lower geographic areas, appear to be developable within the current service boundaries, so those could proceed as soon as they were annexed, if they're currently outside the city limits today. So our phasing section will talk a little bit more about the annexation strategy vis-a-vis urban renewal, because you could align those the annexation with a new urban renewal district, if you wish, to capture the value of this new area being brought into the city and then help recycle those funds back into the district. Does that sound on this right track, Mr. Hanson, please?
Number 14,
Yeah.
right-hand column,
Yeah.
exactions. What's a synonym for that?
Yeah, so this would be the Foothills Neighborhood Park Test. That is different than, DJ, that's different than the Central Green, because the Central Green is number 13. DJ, do you remember what you were thinking about when you wrote exactions, which is a term we don't use liberally?
Yeah, it's another code word for a private developer making improvements. It was the trigger for the Dolan case against taking. There needs to be, if you ask a developer to build something, the amount of contribution that they make needs to be commensurate with the benefits that they get. So you develop, and the city planning staff can probably talk about this with you on the side, but essentially you can ask developers to build certain things as a condition of development approval. You need to tread carefully when you do that, lest the exaction that you're asking for is a challenge, and the benefit is disproportionate with what you're telling them they need to do. So examples of that could be widening the sidewalk a little bit more so than the standard calls for. Those are the kinds of things that you might be able to get through an exaction, and that's the kind of contribution, developer contribution, developer requirements that I was thinking of there.
Thanks, and then Rich, please.
Yeah, along the same lines, we made the correction earlier from private contribution to developer contribution. That's what we should use for exaction. Also, add that whenever the city shows a part benefit within the geographic boundary of the development plan, the city sometimes has the ability to exchange SDC credits from the parks SDC in exchange for that. So that's another opportunity.
Another way to participate. It's really more of a public-private partnership than it is an exaction. So we'll probably just change that language because it's overly negative. Yeah, it comes too close to condemnation and other things that we don't do in the cities and most of the state anymore. So thanks for pointing that out. Very
nice. One other point, touching on what Rich just said, is that the city's PUD rules require 35% dedication of open space, and that can sometimes be exchanged and provide park land, and so it's another part of it's one of the things that you have at your disposal. But PUDs, you have to have a big enough piece of property for that to work, and so I'm not sure just how widely you would be able to make use of that here.
Okay. Thank you, DJ. We're going to charge on, but please feel free to stay tuned because I know we have inclusionary zoning in the next memo in 6. So if we could just touch on that before we lose you for the evening, because we feel strongly we should let you out on time since it is this evening. Please, yeah.
I want to mention that DJ, as he was starting his research on this project, talked to Ron Tierney, and Ron reviewed the memo after he wrote it, and then Ron is also sitting on our project advisory committee, and he was here this afternoon. So I think that speaks well to what we're doing here, because we all trust Ron to know our city and to steer us in the right direction, so.
It was interesting. It was Ron's actually guidance to suggest this is now the time to start developing an urban renewal district here. It would take the 3 years. So it was a very strong recommendation that that's what you'll probably see coming back in our refined memo to really capture that guidance, and now's the time to think about that before you annex, and are able to capture some of that value. So it's great to have them at the table.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, thank you. So on this technical memo number 6, this shifts back a little bit just so now me, Lawrence, Rich, and BJ delivering this memo to the city and to you. But this is all the things plan and policy-wise that could help to implement the plan. So in the first part of the document, I just restate the vision and the goals that we talked about earlier in the fall and in December. So there's very little new there. In the planning policy section, I built on the plan policies in the current comprehensive plan and the NELSCOT plan, and just extended them to update and recognize the goals that we're trying to accomplish here. So again, would appreciate any comments now or in the next week on these plan policies. So this would be if you did an overlay district specific to this NELSCOT gap area, these are the plan policies that would apply. And then help you enforce any subsequent regulations that would be part of the private-public partnership to develop out the area. On the code, starting on page 7, are the code and implementation measures. So again, I think that we'll sort of elevate this and talk about the relationship between that and urban renewal potential. And then Lawrence gave us a good overview of the transition from traditional implementation measures and Euclidean code to a form-based code for NELSCOT gap, and why we do that, so the things that we do there. So Lawrence, if you wouldn't mind just speaking just a little bit to this section. And we don't just generally like to have, throw regulations around. There's always a reason. So I would like us all, and commissioners and councilors, to be mindful of, keep asking the consulting team, why are you trying to accomplish this? Why would you suggest these strategies? It's because of the outcomes and the benefits you're trying to provide to the district. So if there's no benefit, then we wouldn't provide the policy or the strategy. But it's all to achieve this with mixed-use districts we've been talking about. Please.
Yes, thank you. This notion of mixed use is really an old-time concept. It's the way that human settlements used to be for a few thousand years or so. It's only really been in the latter half of the 20th century, maybe 50 years, 60 years or so, that the planning profession came to this notion that we've got to separate everything out. We've got to put all the industrial over there because it's dirty, always. It's not always dirty. Sometimes people live and work right next to it, right close to one another. We have to separate out the high-density apartments from the medium-density apartments completely in different zones. We've got to have shopping centers and malls that are in big box stores all in one big zone, and nothing can ever mix. And that's why we have then major arterials and highways in between all those things. Getting clogged up because we've got to drive between all of those. So the whole idea of mixing uses means that that there's been developed over the last 20 years or so, I'd say, this notion of a form-based code. And it fits to that idea we talked about of the transect from more urban, more central in a neighborhood or a town to the edges. And that there are different types of building sizes, from sort of bigger buildings, more compacted, more together, higher concentration in the core areas of the neighborhoods, and then it filters out into single family out at the edges. That's a form. We're talking about the form of the buildings rather than just the uses of them. You can have a little shop sometimes in the middle of a residential neighborhood, possibly. It could fit into something that looks and feels like a house. Or you can have an apartment building right in a downtown. You can just go to any old great downtown, Minville on the way out to here. I do refer to other places often. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and all in between, because they give us a lot of good lessons. So, to the core of this idea
And maybe to table 1 even, yeah.
And let's flip to table 1 on page
11.
11, beginning on page 11. This goes on for several pages, and I'm not going to, 4 pages here. I'm not going to go into all the details of this, because this is really just kind of a snapshot, a rough sketch of the idea of what a form-based rather than only use-based code would look like. And when we talk about form-based, it's not either or. There's still ideas about uses being mixed in here. We talked about the core area of the neighborhood having a mix of commercial, and as you get outside of that, not having retail and commercial in the other zones. But I'd like to touch on the top, the blue along the top of this matrix. Packages of implementation measures on the left. Building standards, architectural standards, and landscape standards. So these 3 general categories, the buildings, their placement, their use, so there is reference to use. Flip the page, their height, parking, and frontage types. Those are just 5 categories that you can talk about, various elements of the building itself. How it's placed on its site. If it's close up to the street curb, or close up to the sidewalk, or if there's a setback. So as you go further out of the central core of the neighborhood, up into the hills, the setbacks become deeper. You get bigger front yards. As you're down on the main street, you're right up there on the sidewalk. So that's an idea about placement.
Right, and again, this is probably a 2-hour workshop, warrants this conversation right now. This is incredibly deep and detailed recommendations. And the reason, just for example, just as Lawrence was just mentioning, why we would want to have a standard that the building be placed right up to the street is for that walking, vibrant feeling as you're walking along, as opposed to walking, on a busy street with a large parking lot behind you. You feel much more exposed as human beings. So it's trying to create spaces that are comfortable for humans and families in the district. And really, at the workshop, the public meeting, if I may, in May, we were talking before the meeting that we really owe it to you and the community to bring back some images of what we're talking about, because reading it in dimensional standards is just not anyone's idea of a good time necessarily, but it only probably makes sense to an urban designer that knows that what this delivers. So I think what we owe you in the community of Lincoln City and Hillstead is to say, go back to some of our earlier PowerPoints, that this is what this is intended to deliver, and this is the way to kind of get there. When you adopt this plan in the summer, you aren't adopting architectural standards. You would be adopting the plan, and then if you ever did decide to update your overlay, your code, then you would get into the specific standards. But these are meant to give you an idea of typical building blocks for a mixed-use district, as we've been talking about. So I just wanted to help frame why there's so many standards in here, which may seem a lot, but it's one of the original ideas when Deb put out for this grant is how do we do things differently that deliver a walkable mixed-use environment that is pleasant for both the property owner and achieves value for the property owner, but also for the public that uses the street. That's what these zones are intended to deliver.
Thank you for pulling me out of the detail I started diving into, because I think maybe just the big picture to leave here is that in each of these 3 zones going up the hill, there's some amount of continuity. The buildings are somewhat looking and feeling generally the same kind of size and spatial arrangement. It's not getting into style, it's not getting into color patterns. You can go deeper into those guidelines or standards, guidelines and standards. But it's generally just the sort of disposition of the buildings as they go from center to edge. Continuity within one street space.
You talked a lot about even just window placement. So much can be done with just window placement. Very subtle tool, but it ends up giving this kind of a relaxing, like, oh, I know I'm in this neighborhood that fits together. And it's up to every jurisdiction's careful balance to how much they want to incentivize versus regulate. But in detailed implementation of this, which is actually not this phase, you and Deborah and whoever she wished to aid her would get into specifics around why would one propose to make a standard window height or regulation. It might seem overly specific, but the important thing is what are we trying to deliver to the future community of Millstadt? So, and then the how is kind of the dimensional standard. So it really deserves a much longer conversation, but we wanted to touch on it tonight, continue it in May, and then what you'd be left with in the summer when you consider adoption is this full plan, the full, land use illustrative diagram, street network, new street standards, and with this kind of breadcrumbs to what some measures and standards would be for a specific form-based code in the Millstadt district. So I know that's a lot. I just want to note that we're so close to 8. I wanted to see if you had any questions or comments on what this is what this is sort of a framework for. Because if not, we'll run into street design, which starts on page 15. And so I know Lawrence feels really strongly about this too. And again, we're just headed into streets as places for people, and not only automobiles. Of course, we all drive. We have to get from here to there in North America. But that Lawrence has been so intentional about the space and the design of these collectors and connectors that would be actually recommending option B there on figure 3 for the Foothills Boulevard collector. Same word. We call it, in urban design, we call it a connector, but it would be in your TSB, it would be designated as the new Millstadt District collector, which would make it SDC eligible because it really would be a system-wide improvement. So if you just would like to touch on probably just even option B, Lawrence, and the reasons why we would design something like that, which is quite larger than the city's standard today.
This is, between the curbs here is really just what your existing TSP's local street dimensions provide, which are 7-foot parking lanes and 10-foot travel lanes. Those are nice and nicely sized. They're not oversized, which you make them bigger, you can move a lot faster. Let's keep them a little tighter, and it slows down the car. Planting strips are really important, that you can have street trees that separate the sidewalk from the parking lane. All too often we're doing these curb-type sidewalks where if you happen to have a driveway in the front, you've got this wavy sidewalk. The main point here to really focus on is a shared walk and bike way. We're showing 12 feet wide. It'd be nice if it could be a little narrower, but this really provides a 6-foot sidewalk and a 6-foot bike lane combined into one really big promenade.
So what you just did in West Devils Lake Road? Is that what you did just up at West Devils Lake?
Is it 12 foot?
Or 10? I can't remember. 10, yeah, so it could be a little narrower.
Could be a little narrower.
Yeah.
Wouldn't mind it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, we don't want this too wide.
And
We're
I
showing
think
this
development
because-
here will be probably more dense than the West Devils Lake, so probably even more use of the sidewalk and bike path.
Okay. So it would be 10 to 12. So did you touch on all the attributes of that cross-section?
Well, one of the little detail, you see the bump right here? That's the parking lane, and you're actually seeing kind of the drainage being right there. This is suggesting that the parking lane might be considered up at the tree level, up above the street. So they're actually going up onto a curb, a rolled curb, not a sharp curb. So they roll up onto a curb, and maybe even having a different paving material for the parking lane. It could be concrete on the sides, or it could be pavers on the sides. Something that differentiates the driving lanes from the parking.
Right.
And you're entering the private realm there.
Tightens up the street, makes it feel a bit narrower.
To close our presentation, really, I feel like I would love to go around once if commissioners and councilors can stay and just give us any final questions or comments before we go. The last thing is just on page 19 are some things we've already discussed with this system development charge financing and strategies for affordable workforce housing. EJ mentioned this inclusionary overlay zoning program as a result of just the state Senate bill that was passed just in February, Senate Bill 1533. It's a new enabling tool for local governments to do an inclusionary overlay program. And then this development rights transfer DJ touched on. The remaining projects there we've been over in Tech Memo 5. And frankly, we can touch on the acceptability and the phasing next time when we get together. Can we extend 10 minutes just to hear from councilors and commissioners and to go around the room once, do you think? Okay. That would be, I would sleep much better at night hearing from you, so if that's worth anything, do you mind anyone, if we start anywhere, I'd appreciate it. I don't know if Councilor Sprague, if you'd like to begin, or we start over here with Commissioner Cunningham. Any preference, Commissioner?
Yeah, I like the idea of the look and everything, but I guess my question would be cost impact, because you have to have a developer buy into this. And as we put more and more regulations or forms or whatever, we add or change the cost of development. And so do we have an idea of this form of development versus the standard form we're currently using and the costs? Because I'm hearing developers talk about how every time we put more regulations and more costs, there's less likelihood they're going to develop in Lincoln City or somewhere where they don't have forms and costs and things like that. So do you have an idea, is this, a 10% increment in cost increase?
I would say a 0% increase.
Cost neutral, yeah, is the
Cost
goal.
neutral issue. Because we're talking about really just grouping similar sized buildings with one another, rather than saying this has to have a lot more bells and whistles and an ornament on this building, or it's got to have fancier elements to it. It's really taking apartment buildings and putting them with apartment buildings of various sizes and townhouses next to each other.
Possibly businesses.
And mixed with businesses. One thing that is expensive is when you do vertical mixed use. When you put residences above a ground floor retail business, you have to have fire separations. So
That's not required here.
But that's not being required here. We're just suggesting that you can do that vertical mixed. You're allowed to do the vertical mixed use, but you can just as well do single story retail
Or side-by-side buildings of different.
May I suggest too that if to me, every building is going to have a window. So it's about, and this is where I would suspend judgment, Commissioner. I would honestly just hold that question in your own mind for months to come, because it is a very fair question. And
keep asking.
And the distinction, what we're driven here to do is to deliver a workforce housing, so even more affordable than general in Lincoln City. So we've been quite conscious to not add any bells and whistles, but it's more talking about a placement of rather than adding on. So that's why the intent is to be cost neutral, but I would say that is a discussion that one would be having for months to make sure it's not adding costs, it's just regulating the form, so you have you have some continuity within a neighborhood.
For instance, and you started to talk about windows. If all the buildings, if all the whole area decided, okay, we're going to do vertical type windows. So the buildings kind of look similar in that, and there's a rhythm that. Now, a vertical window doesn't cost any more than a horizontal window when you're starting out with a brand new building. And so it's a simple way of trying to create a character without adding a difference in cost. So, it still allows a lot of variation in how you develop and your style of your building and so forth. But it might be a characteristic that could carry through the neighborhood. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to go for. Another thing I want to mention is I used to work with somebody who would spend a lot of years as an assessor, and he said standards add value because somebody can develop a property with confidence that the property next to his or hers is going to be of a similar quality and design, and there's going to be some consistency in the neighborhood, as opposed to if you have to buy and develop a property not knowing what could possibly happen next door. So the form part of this is adding some confidence that you're going to have a neighborhood that looks attractive.
Hangs together, but that is a $1 million question, no pun intended. So please hang on to that.
Well, yeah, because affordable housing has to be affordable.
That's right.
It can't be
High end.
wonderful looking,
Yeah.
but nobody can afford it.
But you know what we're aiming for is that quality housing for everyone, so that just because we're of lower income or happen to work, in retail or service industry, we also deserve quality housing, you know what I mean? So that we're trying to, establish a quality minimum for everybody is the goal, without adding cost. So that's the sweet spot we're heading towards. Thank you for raising it. Counselor?
But let's stay on that track. Now, I'll take the other one. This is not, Beaverton.
That's right.
And not Washington County where you've got flat land. I mean, this goes up vertical right away. And that's what I was alluding to earlier was, in my case, the cost of utilities when you're going up. So one of the things you could bring back some pictures or point me to, the West Hills of Portland, what I'm kind of envisioning here. This is the West Hill or East Hills, Nelson. I only see big houses as you climb up, and I'm used to in real estate, once you get off the bottom land, when you now create views, one, land is more expensive. Part of it is because it's expensive to get utilities up there and foundations and this building structure. So I'm having trouble, I drive by it and the train, I haven't walked it, but I'm envisioning pretty high elevations and what it would look like and who's going to buy that higher product. And I'm not looking for exclusive neighborhoods. So back to your point, and I appreciated the workforce housing and everything else. But I'm seeing more and more subsidy of some nature to get workforce in there. So I'm trying to find ways, whether it's in this layout, and I love the layout of the streets, but we all know, grids are cheaper to build, cheaper to lay pipe. So, laying, water pipe all through these curvy streets is pretty expensive. And so I guess where I was going was, have we looked at a utility design that maybe doesn't track with the streets? And I don't even know how to do that. It takes easements and everything else. But I'm looking, since we're out of the box anyway here, of what might be a way to cut traditional costs without giving up services or quality
as we go up the
or anything
hill.
else.
And particularly as we go up the hill, I think you're speaking to, because definitely in this, flatter area,
Right.
we're working with these developers, this is more, easily graded than as you go up the hill. So we have envisioned a lower intensity of development as you go up the hill. But Rich, I don't know, you do quite a bit of challenging terrain. Did any thoughts come to mind, or we can certainly think about it and get back to the counselor, but just wondering if you had anything to add from your experience.
Or just point me to some nice things that you see as good models. So I can grab that vision.
The utility placements are usually driven by maintenance. And so Lila will tell you it's got to be readily available. So that typically puts it in a street. But there are other alternative designs, or doesn't necessarily have to be in the street as long as it's accessible to maintenance. So an alley is a possibility, even a soft path can be a possibility. So it's finding the most expeditious way to lay in the services in a cost-effective manner, balancing that with length of service, individual services, accessibility for service equipment, those kind of things. So each site's going to be a little bit different, but the rule of thumb is you go in the streets because that's the easiest way to build it. Curvilinear streets, yes. You end up, you can't maximize your life between manholes, things like that, so you have shorter runs between manholes, and manholes raise costs. But there are things that you can do in order to keep the curvilinear. Now, looking at my shoulder because I've got somebody else I need to answer feedback to. There's a balance, between attractive form and cost. So you're hitting on the right buttons, and those are the things we need to be cognitive of as we go through the process.
And Dave, Mr. Reese, do you have anything you want to add at this juncture?
I really don't. I believe the questions are valid, but the reality is the utilities are best served in the public right-of-way because you've got
service to both sides of the street. And although it's steep terrain, today's infrastructure materials lend themselves well to those kinds of slopes, and we have to deal with fire code for grade, street grades, so those things have kind of come into play. Rich was correct. More manholes usually come into play when we have curvilinear streets, but as we all know, there's character in curves. And
Is there some savings in following the topography instead of trying to?
Absolutely.
Which we have.
Yes, there's some statement, plus the sewers can stay relatively shallow on flat land, they have to get deeper and deeper and deeper, but on hillsides, you're cutting and filling more of the streets, so there are trade-offs in costs that cause the development spectrum.
But I guess what I'm saying is I hear the words, I need to see, we use affordable, we use workforce, we use good intentions, but, I'm having a little trouble envisioning, truly affordable in this community, affordable housing. And so then I get into the sense of either I've got to subsidize the heck out of it, or I'm going to sell it to more second home, interlopers as a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not meeting the whole need. So I'm just trying to press you guys to help us, meet our desire.
I wouldn't rule that out necessarily.
Particularly in these areas. I mean,
Yeah,
we're not challenging that it will get more expensive in the middle. You're exactly right. So I know that this developer, when we came in, intends to build a cluster higher intensity, really, which is, remember, 200 homes in this district is not a tremendous amount. But in his development here, they want to deliver that product, but they're not talking about, these hills here. They are talking about a lower, less steep grade. So there probably will be its own natural transect of lesser affordable homes in the hills. And I'll look into the Bethany area that was just developed, and it's in northern Washington County. I think City of Portland had annexes. It's very challenging terrain, but we'll look at what they did. I know it didn't end up being inexpensive. But we'll look and see if any of it became affordable, but it's very challenging to deliver in the hills, right?
I did want to share one thing.
Our Commissioner's waiting here, Commissioner Griffith's waiting.
Yeah. Barb Gibson was here this afternoon, and she reminded us that her Christmas cottage is actually, it's single story facing the slip lane, but it has 2 stories below it where she lived happily, in the residence with her family for many years. And so that's one way to use the terrain to actually have 2 accessible fronts.
Yeah. Yep. And we did take pictures.
If I could add one thing, this is DJ. The one thing that you don't have any control over and can't is the market. To the extent that you're creating properties up here with $1 million views, hoping to provide $100,000 houses, you're fighting a losing game. So you just have to ask yourself, is this realistic from the standpoint of what the market is asking for and looking to provide in your area for housing that is out of reach of people that are, working shifts, whom you want to provide housing for in your town. And so I think that the points are well taken. I agree with Rich that from an infrastructure standpoint, at the margin, it's not that significant. The real question is, how does this fit in the local marketplace? And if what you're building, what you're offering to people is to provide a product that is not desired by people who are looking for $1 million views, you don't have a view of the ocean. I'm not sure that you're creating $1 million views here. So even though there are some slopes, I'm not so sure that that's what the market is looking for the really expensive stuff. It is going to require some subsidy just because those things are expensive. The infrastructure is expensive to put in. But I think you just need to look at the marketplace and whether or not where you're proposing it is in line with what the market thinks is appropriate for workforce housing versus vacation rentals and vacation properties.
Well, in vacation homes, to be clear, you probably read in the memos that the city has asked us to just keep vacation rentals not in this district. So this would be all for resident year-round employees and property owners. Please, Councilor, Commissioner, you're waiting.
I really like the diversity in the lowland area, part of the Mascot Gap, but can't we move that diversity up into the hills also, so we don't just have single-family homes there, but we have duplexes, or we have, more intensified housing, because I think everybody should have the chance to have those good views.
Remember, even the LLC in there is called possible sunset views, so I'm not sure how many of the areas that actually have views. But that sense of elevation, that shouldn't be restricted necessarily. And I'll have to go back and check maybe Lawrence, as we go to the next questions, you can check your tables, but I think that townhomes and duplexes are allowed up the hillside, and there's no reason necessarily why not.
And it's certainly true that we can look at different development patterns, and we'll see that there's a range of costs and infrastructure, but you can take those costs, no matter what the range is, and divide it into different densities and get different costs per unit. That can be another strategy to addressing affordability.
The only rationale, however, of putting more density down where retail and business could be is that if you're putting that farther away up a hill without those businesses, you have to now drive or walk. More people are walking, driving, biking longer distances to get down to the services. You can ask the question, well, why can't we put those services up on the hills? They wouldn't be viable up far.
It's all pretty much within 5 minutes walking anywhere in that area.
I know we have to remember the scale, so it's not too
scale
bad.
is small.
Lawrence, if someone is getting down here, they're not going to think they could. So, in your
It's very walkable.
this is your diagram.
Well, yes, except for that we don't know within this rather large zone really how much and where the retail really would be most viable from a market standpoint. It may be arguable that it really is only going to be viable right down on the highway where it's got enough customers coming by to supply it. We'd love to see some retail up around the sort of center of the neighborhood with some of the traffic that's flowing by here on foothills. But we can't know that for quite a while. So, in other words, the walking distance from here down to the retail shop here might actually be all the way to the retail shop there in the future.
I can also add that in our existing planned unit development regulations, let's say you've got a site that is big enough for 100 houses, 100 dwelling units. If you include affordable dwelling units, you get 10 more dwelling units, only 5 of which have to be affordable. So you're getting basically that other 5 subsidizes the 5 affordable.
So
it encourages it.
There too.
And if this is an area where people are living pretty much year-round, that's really going to enhance retail options within the gap.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, if there is that density that gets built up, it makes a balance between the retail.
And so just reading about row houses and duplexes in this zone, certainly, but why don't we, Laura's going to talk about, why not allow, this zone still also indicates duplexes, as well as single families, but it's, I'd like to talk to Lawrence offline and to Rich and to see if there's any, is there a reason why, except for just the trip generation that we're not talking about.
Well, I was just thinking more in terms of more intense residential.
Yes, exactly, yeah, thanks for suggesting. Any other observations on the plan, Commissioner, and then? Yeah, please, sir, yeah.
A few questions. The alleys, are they a necessity? I mean, I know Olivia Beach has alleys now, and that's largely BRDs, and it's not really used. So, I mean, I understand the 2-point attack of the fire possibilities and things like that, but is that an absolute necessity? And if we take those out, could it reduce the cost of that because you're building 2 roads? The incentives, I heard TJ say that incentives don't necessarily always work, but could be a possibility. So instead of saying, if you do this, you'll get that, could there be another way to sell this project instead of incentives? And how are southbound traffic going to shop the northbound frontage?
Where should we start with?
I want to make sure you're, that I didn't just forget your first one, which was
Alleys.
the alleys, right, thank you. And then the requirement rather than incentive, so just move more towards standards rather than incentives for the things we really care about. And then thirdly, the north and southbound. Do you want to just take the north and southbound one real quick?
It is, clearly it is predominantly a northbound frontage lane. If you're coming south and you want to get into that frontage lane, you're going to have to cross over.
And where do you propose people do that? Because 32nd Street is already iffy, and if they're going to turn into Olivia Beach, then you're going to put all that traffic in that turn, and they're going to turn around inside Olivia Beach residential area to go cut across to then go half a block to turn right.
Are you thinking that it should be a two-way?
I don't know what it should be, but I'm just saying it's kind of complicated if you're going south to go back north.
It's very complicated. So this 23rd access here would have a light. So the way to come in southbound would be this way, and then from the back.
And then park behind the buildings,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yep, an interior.
So I mean, and that's
Yeah, an interior. So this is it's a small
it's not
area.
as handsome coming south as it is going north.
It's not a slip lane coming south. Yeah, no, it's more a jaggedy road. But there is access options from the south going north. Yeah, in the same way that Nelson deals with that today. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, but you have a light at 32nd Street to go if you're going north to go back and turn left and go south. But
Sure enough.
where do you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, these are multi-way boulevards, actually, that when they have them on both sides. Shattuck Boulevard in Berkeley, California.
But can we fit it? I don't think we've determined we can fit that here.
No,
Yeah.
there's nothing on the west side.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the hill on the west side.
Yeah.
Right.
It's one piece, it's one side of the Champs-Elysees in Paris, you know, it's two sides.
I think it's handsome and I think it's great, but I'm just asking,
Yeah.
what do people who don't know what to do?
Yeah, so I think one of the points our PAC members were making earlier was to be really clear on signage. So on the street level, I hate to repeat, but I think that the way to exit those coming from the north is from Foothills Boulevard. You know, so you just will have to know either you're coming across at, you know, as you say, at 32nd, you have to wait till you come on 32nd or here, which isn't preferable, so it wouldn't be signalized. But
Is
then-
there a way to put in, like in Glen Eden Beach, how they have those turnarounds off to the side that they can turn with no light to then go back, you know what I mean?
Like over, like,
Jug handles?
Actually, they take a lot of real estate.
And I know that takes a lot of space, but
So typically what you'd have to do instead is you pull around, you pull into a drive or whatever, and pull around, go back out. If you've missed it, if you're on your way down, if you've missed 23rd and then you go, oh wow, that looks like a really cool neighborhood.
yeah,
I want to
you're
get
gonna
it.
go to 32nd and go to Lee.
You have to go back up, or, yeah.
so, yes. But I'll check with DKS on that. Point is well taken. Yeah, it's a good. Thanks for asking.
And ideally,
It's
we
better to
could
get
sit-
it here than when we're at planning commission asking for adoption.
Well,
So
I'm
thanks.
on it.
Or you
Exactly. They get to bring that early morning. Yeah. early
Ideally,
morning.
we'd have maybe a signalized intersection in the middle of this, but we can't have any more.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe you use the slip lane in front of the Nelscott Strip as a jug.
It's not a slip lane, it's a frontage, not a slip lane.
Because it already exists and we're not asking for funding for it. But if somebody goes through there, they may stop and shop or get some lunch and then they come back up and they go up through the new frontage lane.
Or hop on the shuttle of the future. So
That's right.
Or walk.
Yeah, that's right. Or walk. Yeah. I know the both council and commissioners have questions. So.
But do you want any response to the question about the alleyways?
Oh, the alley, quick,
Yeah.
yes, talk about the
Are
alley.
they critical? Are they essential?
Correct. I mean, is that a way to reduce the cost of development? To eliminate those? Is that an absolute necessity to the,
Great question.
Well, they cost something, of course. They're only 20 feet wide. And you only actually have to have 12 feet of pavement in the middle of it. So it's basically like a combined driveway. And you pull right in off of them into your garage. If you look at Olivia Beach, there ain't no driveways in Olivia Beach. There are no driveways coming from the fronts of the houses going into a big
And that's the
two-car
gain.
garage.
What you gain is you don't have the front.
They don't have the individual investment in a driveway.
Every driveway.
So it's a trade-off rather than extra cost in that case, but.
So yeah, I mean, people have often said, "Oh, that's expensive to hold it," but no, we don't have any driveways in the front, and it's a heck of a lot more beautiful streetscapes. Makes more vibrant, makes it great, much better walkable, and walking and biking and playing in the alleyways because cars are only creeping through them because they're so tight. Are actually other great public spaces.
And it's also another opportunity, as came out in our afternoon meeting, that for an accessory dwelling unit to maybe front on the alley side. So it might.
Certainly a fair question, but again, I think when we come back, let's, for the general public that hasn't had this in-depth dive is, what are the benefits of the attributes we're talking about? Because we've had the benefits 2 meetings ago, and now we were just hearing tonight about the cost and the implementation. So with each main strategy, including alley, I think it's incumbent upon us to explain why we're proposing and the benefits of it, and is it worth the cost?
But also I have to say that they may not be the best on every street here, because on hillsides, they can be difficult. If the lot is too steep, accessing a garage off of one level and the house off the front, actually at a certain height, becomes kind of unfeasible. You're walking an entire story down.
It's great on flat land.
It's best on flat land. It works on some slope, but at a certain point in the West Hills, that was mentioned earlier around Portland, you'll actually find front-loaded garages right into the retaining wall of and the house is sitting up on top of a retaining wall. Actually, quite beautiful.
I have to cut you off. I need to hear from the commissioners and councilors. I'm so sorry.
I just think we're going a little bit deep dive for a wrap-up.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to move it along.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you guys have done here. This is, over the several of these presentations I've been through, this is a real leap forward from the last time. And I thank you guys a lot for it. I noticed a couple of commissioners wincing when the topic of adding up a sales tax and something was brought up. I don't think that was going to fly.
I heard that's unpopular, yes. It might not end up recommending that.
So I really like the proposal and the plan. And
Thanks. Thank you.
very
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. And Councilor Sprague, you've been patient as well. Thanks.
I think we have to remember that we're looking up 50 years. 2 years ago, we were in a situation in Lincoln City where we really had a shortage of buildable land. All of a sudden, with the addition of the village's Cascade Head, we also have another PUD that Pacific Palisades has available property. And then we're talking about adding this as available property in the future, sometime in building up. But I'm wondering if the cost up front will ever get paid off if we have so much buildable land. It'll take so long to recoup that cost. So I think we need to be careful about how we go forward with a development like this.
Yeah, I think it's certainly in a phased manner would probably be prudent as well. Any other, I know we got this side of the room, and Commissioner, thank you. Councilor Walke, any questions or comments from your perspective?
Not really anything else to add.
Okay.
I do like us to remember that it's long-term.
Yeah, long term.
And the flat land is the most affordable and the most short-term.
The earliest phase, yeah. Thanks. All right. Councilor Chester, please.
I was taken by Barbara's concerns this afternoon at the PAC meeting. Barbara Gibson, Jenkins, regarding density, more cars, more parking, and 101 still being a barrier. And yet, I think we need to plan down the road rather than allow development to just occur piecemeal. So here we are trying to plan. I can't think of a better alternative.
it's risky, change is risky. Maybe it'll succeed, maybe it won't, I don't know. But I support the planning effort.
Mitigating the worst and aiming for the best is, I think, that the best we can do is that in a constrained environment when we're inheriting so much of the travel pattern, which drew us all to this place. Did everyone get a chance for a my apologies, Councilor Ward?
I'm good.
Yes.
I was sworn to silence.
Who did that? Councilor Ward was our counselor in charge during community design week, and we so appreciate your presence during that week. So really nothing tonight, huh? You took the pledge. Who did that? Good. All right. Well, I do appreciate the detail. So and I am very serious about wanting to get these, any questions and concerns out before we come to Planning Commission this summer, because when we're on our feet at a Planning Commission proposing adoption, it is very difficult to then come back to you with answers. So thank you for the detailed questions and the general oversight. If you have additional questions, please shoot them our way. We owe Councilor and some others some answers back. And really hope for a very good presentation in May. So for the public meeting, hope you'll help us spread the word. And then we're also due back for another PAC meeting, to which we'll probably invite you then. I'm not sure that we're planned for another council PC briefing just in May, because we won't have too much more new information. But then coming to you for adoption this summer. Yeah, for hearing. So it's wrapping right up. Any other?
Well, I'll break my silence.
Great.
Just
I feel you. We need it. Thank you.
No. Tonight, I think I didn't learn 4 or 5 words. And you guys are all professionals, and you all have college degrees in this. And there's a lot of that, at least for me, I had difficulty.
Yeah.
There's words that are unique to your industry. And while I'm trying to figure those out, you get another paragraph down the road and trying to catch up to you. So that's not a criticism. It's just, just from my struggle.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Councilor. Please do let us know, or Deb know, if there's anything. They are, a number. I'm learning when I get to that, the funding and financing. As counselors, you're probably more familiar with me in that arena. And so it's a struggle, in some areas we have specialty and others not. So I almost feel like next time I should bring a jargon card and just give you a red card to throw off anytime we're ahead of ourselves. But please don't ever hesitate to
There's a lot of initialism, too.
Yeah.
Figure out what those words are.
those acronyms, yeah.
But anyway, that's probably just me, because I didn't study like I should have. So.
No. Yeah.
I do want to say, and I should have said this at the beginning of the meeting, for those people watching at home, that if some of the images were not clear or you did not quite understand what we were talking about, all these documents are online and they are on our website. We have a website for the project, which is www.nelscottplan.org. We also have packets and the video, and you can stream this at home on your computers by going to our lincolncity.org website and going to, on the left-hand side, it says agendas and packets and video. So if anybody wants to review this, or even the people who are here want to go back and see it again, then it is all available. So we hope that everybody will dig into this as much as they want, and we'll have a chance in June for public comment.
May,
sorry.
next month.
So we have to decide when and where that is. We haven't yet, but we will make sure we get the word out.
And if we could receive any further comments just on this draft by April 26th, a week from tonight, we'd appreciate it, because then the consulting team will respond in final memos and prepare that draft plan for you. So thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it very much. Is that right? Thank you very much. Thank you. Or since you adjourned.